Well, hello, and welcome to the MilVet Podcast. Your podcast hosts are Brendan Aronson, Tim Shaw, and Beau Higgins. We are military veterans, entrepreneurs, and investors. But most importantly, we strive to empower military service members, veterans, and their families. We believe that all veterans deserve a career that fires them up, a career in which you can learn, you can earn, and you can build a world class network. On this podcast, we interview civilian and military veteran leaders who are incredible founders, writers, thinkers, and investors. My primary goal is to inspire you to achieve great things. Let's dive into today's episode. Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of the MilVet Podcast. I am your host, Beau Higgins, and I have the pleasure today to be joined by Thomas Higginbotham, and we'll learn more about Thomas in a minute. But for those that may have not heard of the MilVet before, maybe you're tuning into your first podcast. The MilVet is an executive platform for veterans that are looking to get into the private equity, venture capital, founder space. If you want to learn more, please go check out our website, www.themilvet.org. Check out our podcast. You can sign up for our newsletters. A lot of great info at themilvet.org. So please check that out if you want to learn more. We're always posting our hot jobs there as well. But today, we have a wonderful guest here that's a veteran himself, and looking forward to talk about his transition story and how it got to where he is today. And we'll start it off, Thomas, by turning over to you. Tell us, hey, welcome to the program, and let us know what you're doing these days, man.
Hey, thanks, Beau. It's good to be on here. Big fan of the MilVet and the whole ecosystem that you all support and are part of. Thomas Higginbotham, founder and CEO of Kestrel. Kestrel is a company that does software for sensor orchestration. We're really focused on a lot of the modernizations of command and control and intelligence processes to be able to provide some software that allows us to do that in a more human on the loop or eventually human out of the loop workflow. We really view the current manual workflows as a bottleneck to being able to provide the right information to the right people at the right time. And so we started this company to do that. I've been obsessed with this problem since I left active duty in 2019. And it's just neat to be able to be working on this at such a time as this, with such historic things going on in the defense community and across the world. So.
No, that's awesome. I'm fired up to learn more about it and how you got to where you are today. Hey, I was an intel officer in the Marine Corps, so I can certainly appreciate the need to have real-time information, intelligence information on time, on target to the right person, and obviously intel does drive operations. So it's the key to success. And I'm a true believer in that. So I think you're onto something here for sure. And I'm excited to hear more about it. But I'd love to back it all up a little bit and kind of start from the beginning of the journey, if you will. I mean, what was your impetus to join the military in the first place, and kind of how that all start? And we'll kind of talk about that, and that's back to the beginning.
Yeah. I was born on an Air Force base, Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines.
Yeah.
My dad, my uncle, my older sister, my grandfather, and I'm missing someone or maybe two people, all Air Force officers. So it was something that I grew up just around, knowing I was going to be a part of that world eventually. We had season football tickets to the Air Force Academy, grew up in the Springs, watched jets fly over every Saturday in the fall. So that was my exposure to the Air Force. I never really ever considered another branch. Always thought I was going to go Air Force. I actually took a detour during my undergrad years. My older sister went to the Air Force Academy, and I decided not to follow in her footsteps for whatever reason. End up joining through officer training school about 18 months after my undergrad was done, and that was the start.
That's awesome. It's pretty funny. I mean, obviously in your DNA from an early age, Although it might have been at Clark Air Force Base when, I don't know if you were there when it got shut down when the
Just,
back in the day when the
yeah,
volcano hit, but I might have scared you off a little bit. But I'm happy it all worked out for you, and obviously you set your own path, right? Separated from your sister a little bit, went down. Hey, nothing wrong with going to Colorado. Great place as well. You ended up where you wanted to be in the first place. So that's great. Well,
yeah,
I'd love to hear a little bit about your Air Force time and really just kind of, what do you think that you were able to take away from your time in the Air Force that has set you up for success as you moved into the civilian world?
yeah, yeah. Well, I joined to fly and ended up going through 2.5 years of flight school, um, realizing that my body was never meant to fly. Um, I have thrown up in the jet more than any human probably has ever thrown up in a fighter in the history of fighters. I don't think that's a disputable fact. In fact, the aerospace physiology program to combat air sickness in pilots was built with me as their guinea pig. I would go up, fly, every flight, get sick, come down, and then they'd spin me in the bear knee chair, which is this like office chair on a swivel. They'd spin me, try to move my head in different directions, try to get me to throw to the edge of throwing up 3 times in 10 minutes. And then they send me to go debrief. And I do the same thing day after day, 2.5 years. And eventually it severed this um, physiological reaction to air sickness. I would still get sick, but I would never throw up and I would still be able to function and do my job. So the program was successful, it's still used today. And I'd say to answer your question on what I learned, there's very few opportunities in life to be faced with such adversity and challenges to overcome. And fortunately, my drive to be flying fighters was stronger than um, my body's desire to be still and not flying. And it's learning that grit and learning to grow through those types of experiences. You don't really get that anywhere outside of the military. And a lot of veterans I talk to have very similar stories of having to overcome things. And we just have to be thankful for those opportunities for growth because you don't get them every day here.
That is definitely a story of perseverance. I don't know if I would have kept on pushing through if every time I went up, I knew on the back or during and on the back end potentially it was going to cause motion sickness. That's crazy. Well, good on you for sticking through it. That is impressive. And certainly, if anyone I talk to, especially in the founder space, you're going to face those obstacles, right? That you have to push through, and
Yeah.
learning that at a young age in the military certainly sets you up for success in the long run for sure, and it did in your case, obviously. I mean, what and did you know? I mean, when you started your career, were you planning on making it a full 25-year run? Did you even think about that, or what was kind of your calculus to say, okay, I did what I wanted to do for whatever reason? What was kind of your pivot point or transition point to kind of make a move out of the military?
Yeah. Yeah. Good question. I early on in my career, and especially when I first started, I expected I would be there for my career. I was looking at what some folks 10, 15, 20 years before me were doing, and there were things I wanted to do, decisions I wanted to influence, technologies I wanted to support. So I early on, I very much thought that I would stay there for a long time. We, I had one combat deployment during the height of ISIS, 2015 and 16, and we knew coming out of the deployment that was right when the Russians showed up in Syria. It was right when we started doing some pretty unprecedented strikes, volume wise and complexity wise. And we knew coming back from that deployment that was the peak. There would not be another combat deployment like that. And I think that from my flying career standpoint was when things started to shift, where I started to look at where can I affect the mission um, in other meaningful ways. I felt like I did what I was supposed to do in the jet, and and started to explore. And so I actually tried several years, 3 different years in a row, to get the Air Force to send me to get my PhD. Um, so I was really interested in going back to school and doing some more nerd stuff, if you will. And the Air Force wouldn't send me because I was a flyer, and we have very few flyers, and I was an instructor, and very few instructors, and they wanted to send me to weapons school instead of some PhD program. So I could just never align my desires with where the Air Force saw me going career wise. But then my last year of active duty, I volunteered to be on the Air Force's Scientific Advisory Board, which was an entity that advises the Secretary of the Air Force on really critical capabilities and technologies and how they would affect strategically and operationally, tactically. Um, our study was on sensor orchestration. It was really looking at our inability to point the right satellites and other sensors at the right place at the right time. We effectively, in every workflow, either get lucky because we put a bunch of satellites where we think things will happen, or we're reacting to things that already happened and allocating a sensor that way. And I realized that was such a major capability gap that um, I had to address it, frankly. And so that's what led me to leave active duty, is to focus on this problem of sensor orchestration, sensor fusion. And so that's what led me to Stanford, actually.
Got it. That's interesting. I mean, obviously, it opened your eyes to something you didn't know was a problem necessarily, because you were probably used to just receiving the intel briefs and getting the
Yeah.
data and going flying the mission, and it was all there for you. Now,
Yeah.
seeing the other side of it and how you collect that data and collect that information and finding and seeing the gap there. So, yeah. So, what kind of a program did you? I mean, you went to Stanford out of the Air Force. What was your like, did you have something in mind already? I mean, or was this kind of a kernel of a concept, or kind of what program did you do, and kind of where do you think you were? I usually ask, where do you think you were going, and where did you end up? You usually end up being different places.
Yeah. Yeah. I know a lot of people's transition out of the military, particularly to a lot of business schools, for instance, um, are transitions to try to search and learn more, open the aperture. Mine was actually, I had a very specific focus, and that was all I cared about, all I was interested in. And it was related to human centered artificial intelligence and actually information theory. How do we actually consume information as humans? How do we make decisions based on information? And how do we build information systems, particularly the future information systems, to support future human AI teaming? Very specific focus on this. And Stanford at the time was standing up the Human Centered AI Institute, focused specifically on this. So actually, my first semester there was finally the grand opening of the first conference they had. But I only applied to Stanford, in part because it was always a dream, but also because this was the place where these types of fields and decisions and research were going to decide the future of this technology for the next 20, 30 years. So there was no other option, and I had to go to Stanford.
And was your going in vision or belief that did you want to make a box, a widget, a thing? Did you have something in mind, or provide a service? I mean, what were you? And I mean, obviously, we'll talk more about what you are doing now. But did you have an end state in mind, or were you just going in to learn and then kind of figure out where that took you?
Yeah, I think I never really, while at Stanford, I never really thought I would start a company.
Okay.
I figured that I would go out and work for a company and help the government adopt artificial intelligence in an operationally relevant manner. Back then, there weren't a lot of companies working in this space. Palantir was just starting to become a fairly well-known name, but it was actually becoming popular because of, frankly, protests. There were protests at Stanford about work they were doing for ICE and other things and whatnot. And so that's actually how I knew of Palantir. But that was really the only company focused on the adoption of artificial intelligence and the digital transformation of critical workflows using AI. And so I actually, I didn't have the thought that I'd build something. I figured that I would inform some policies. So I'd spent most of my time at Stanford skipping business class, but instead going over to computer science to do research and write case studies. So we've got probably 6 or 7 case studies published on human-centered AI and in businesses, for instance.
That's pretty sweet. I mean, I think that's probably, it makes sense that you would think of it that way. That okay, I just want to absorb all the information out there as much as possible. And obviously, being at Stanford at that time was very much the cutting edge of where those discussions were happening. And then were you teaching yourself, or I mean, I say you do teach yourself AI, but you were obviously investing in the technology personally to understand how it worked as well, right? So it was more than a business degree. I mean, it was a technical education you were getting for the really more importantly than the business side of things.
Yeah, you're very right. I my undergrad was in econometrics, so I was always into statistics, but I never knew how to code. I learned how to code in my transition from the military and during Stanford, and then spent about a year and a half um, actually in industry, leading teams that coded. I wouldn't say that any of my code was actually put into a product, but today it is.
Yeah.
Code that I've written as part of Kestrel. So.
That's awesome. So, all right. So you finish up your time there, and just kind of just walk us through the next steps. I mean, from there, what was there an epiphany moment at some point, like I'm doing this myself, or did it take a while to kind of percolate that up?
Took a while. Took a longer time than I think most people expect. Once they get a lot of people expect once you get that bug to maybe start a company, that that bug turns into your life. For me, it wasn't that way. For me, it was very slow, almost I would say almost like risk averse type of growth into that founder mindset. Um, I my first job out of Stanford was Google X, in an ecosystem of extremely talented people who are put together on these teams in sort of a seemingly mismatched team to try to solve very complex problems. They're effectively like the DARPA of commercial technologies, where they are really focused on initially solving the hardest problem, and then once they solve that hard problem, building a business around it. It was fascinating, but it was just for me it was a culture mismatch, and our program got shut down, and then I ended up moving to C3 AI. I did some work in engineering for about a year and a half there, and then moved into the sales and the growth side for the defense business at C3, and I learned so much in those 2 jobs that I frankly would never have been successful as a founder having not had that experience. Um, it was things like changing pricing strategies. It was restructuring organizations. It was aligning incentives on the sales side. It was the obsession of value driven sales and value driven product development. So many lessons that I learned, both good and bad, that helped me be prepared to be a founder, frankly.
A couple of things I want to pull out of what you said. One of them is the importance of culture, because I think people don't. A lot of veterans, transitioning veterans in particular, don't take that into consideration when, because you're leaving a very unique culture, whether it's the Air Force or the Marine Corps or the Navy or the Army. It's a very structured, again, it is what it is, and you know it, you get used to it, and you adapt to it. It
Yeah.
can be very challenging to go to a place where the culture is not aligned with your values, maybe for whatever reason, and I tell people all the time, that are transitioning, and spend time focusing on the culture of the place you're going to, because if you're misaligned, you're probably not going to be there for long. So I guess it's an important thread for people to think about as they transition, that it matters. I mean, you can do the job anywhere. The job itself is what going to keep you there. The culture is going to keep you there. So I think it's just something
Yeah.
I like to hammer home. Um,
Yeah.
but I also wanted, as you did kind of figure this out and then move into the sales piece, I think that's so important because everything you do in life is selling, right? I mean, in
Yeah.
reality, you're selling yourself. To your as a founder, you're going to be out there selling, and you better believe in yourself. And to learn how to sell and the art of sales in whatever way that is so critical, because I mean, and I truly believe that everything we do in some way, shape, or form is sales. You're trying to convince somebody of your argument. You're selling them on what you believe, right? You're selling them on a product. You're selling them on something. So I can see how that would have been a critical step for you to get that knowledge of say the bigger picture of sales and a lot of aspects to it that obviously set you up for success in long term because you had figured out what that takes to sell, because that's what you're doing at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely agree. I think everyone at some point in their life should be a builder, and everyone at some point in their life should be a seller. And those are like two experiences that often people are try to avoid or are afraid to jump into for one reason or another. I was complete imposter trying to build something, trying to do anything engineering wise. Self-taught how to code. I audited a bunch of computer science classes. Complete imposter. But that experience is like the part of the foundation of what built Kestrel. Selling is another thing that a lot of people have aversion to. Calling people that they've built relationships with and trying to eventually sell something. Learning how to do that and the skills related to that, but importantly, the mindset related to it is so critical. For us, it's like when you're active duty, you have this mission that you're supposed to do, and you rally all your effort around that, and you have the right mindset into completion of that mission. On the industry side, your mission is to get the right capability to the people who need that capability. And frankly, if you avoid the skill of learning how to sell, you are not doing your duty and obligation to that mission. Um, and it is learning the system. It's understanding how to get the right capability, the right people, connecting dots. It's something that you cannot neglect.
Yeah, no, I love that you compare that, what the military mission is to the civilian mission, and having that and understanding that, when you're in it, and it's different, but in a lot of ways you're trying to get to an objective, and maybe a little different way you do it, and the leadership of it may be different, and the resources may be different, but at the end of the day, it's about mission accomplishment and how you get the team focused on that. Well,
Yeah.
what was the? Did you have like the aha moment that, okay, I see something out there. I see a gap in the market or an opportunity in the market, and I'm going to go all in. And what was that for you?
Mm.
Because I thought it was interesting when you talked earlier about being a little bit risk averse
Mhm.
initially, because every founder has to at some point say, I am going all in. I am betting on myself. So it's obviously that's a pretty big switch of the pendulum from risk averse to being like chips all in the table. So
Yeah.
what was that all about for you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, I've been obsessed with this problem of sensor orchestration since I was active duty. My work at Google X was in a similar sensor fusion type of field or problem. And at C3, when you're applying to C3 AI, you have to do a written assignment. And that written assignment for me was to write about a use case that I felt was very prime for artificial intelligence. I wrote about sensor orchestration. I effectively wrote about Kestrel 5 years before I started it. And so I spent a couple different projects in the Space Force and the Army during my Kestrel or during my C3 time, building what I eventually left C3 to start, which was Kestrel. The aha moment for me was finally figuring out the business model to build the capability that the DoD actually needed. When I say that, it's sort of nuanced. The technology of artificial intelligence moves so quickly and evolves so quickly that often the traditional acquisitions processes do not work because you're setting requirements at the beginning of a program for a particular technology, and that technology is obsolete a year later when you're still delivering that program. And that's a problem. One of the ways to get around that is to have a commercial software company that is investing in a product for many different customers, because then that company has the incentive to adopt the best of breed technologies and then to deliver that in sort of a firm fixed price basis to the government. We're now seeing that is the way acquisition is happening now in this current administration. But a year ago, 2 years ago, that was foreign. Commercial software products being sold to the government was, Palantir was doing it, and that was effectively the only success at scale. But realizing that we could actually productize orchestration such that we could reuse that same product across many different customers, that was the aha moment. When we realized we could actually do that. What the Army needs for orchestration of small drones can be reused and refactored into what the Air Force needs for orchestration of government satellites, for instance. That was a critical piece because we need a commercial software company, but you need it to be VC backable such that you can actually raise money, invest in this product. So you needed to have many different customers you could meet with the same product, have higher margins. So that was, frankly, not something that was easy to come across. That was the hesitancy for at least a year and a half when I thought about leaving C3 to start a company. It was, will this company actually succeed to get the right capability out?
Well, obviously, you jumped at some point and made the move, and talk about that. I mean, it's obviously, I'm sure there it's always risky. I'm sure you had a belief in it. You have to have a rock solid belief in yourself and what you are offering. I mean, what was that process like for you, and what have you learned as a founder at the startup? Like, what would you tell yourself now? Like, I wish you knew now that you didn't know then, of what the process would be like. Because I'm sure there were a lot of things you knocked on a lot of doors and were pitching it the wrong way, or I mean, you just learn over time what works and what doesn't work. So, what advice would you give yourself now? When you started out.
Yeah, one of my mentors always convinced me or encouraged me to just bet on yourself. It's a lot easier when you have experience, you have relevant experience. The 5 years I spent at Google X and C3, the time I spent at Stanford, all relevant experience for the market. And so in a lot of ways, my safety net was high. I could jump and not be worried. So it's almost, a lot of founders take massive risk to start companies. For us, we knew the first $200 million of revenue for Kestrel before we ever started Kestrel. We knew where that money would be, who would be running those programs. It'll take some time to get there, but we actually knew how to get there because we had already been working on a similar type of solution. So I would say, in a lot of senses, it was a risk averse thing. For me, it was less of a decision. It was, I think the biggest convincing I needed to do was actually family. Um, I got 3 young kids at home. Making the decision to leave a stable, high paying job to effectively, take 100% pay cut. And eventually it was just a 80% pay cut, but major pay cut, major transformation of life. The family is in it. Family is it's part of Kestrel. So that was the biggest convincing I needed to do, I think.
And did you? I mean, your model of, again, I think you're maybe unique in this in some ways, that you really had a clear path for success on a very specific program and specific targets that you knew would be success. I mean, the dots were already there. You just kind of had to make it happen, because so many
Yeah.
founders I talk to, have an idea of what their product or service is going to be, and then over time it shifts a little bit based on just whether it's feedback from investors or feedback from their customers, or from of a wide variety of things. But it sounds like, for the most part, you had a plan. It was really about executing a plan that was almost guaranteed. It's never a guarantee, but had a very high likelihood of success. I mean, did
Yeah.
that make it? I guess I'll ask this question: did that make it easy for you to raise the capital you need to get things started, because the dots were just right there? You just needed the money to do it. I'm curious about how, usually it's like, man, I called 1,000 people trying to raise money, and one of them, finally did. But you might not have had that journey. So what was your journey like on that side of the house?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first I'll say that not certainly most founders do not have that clarity. Um, and it's a good thing to have an open aperture to be thinking about where you need to pivot next. Several times over our first year as a company, people tried to convince me to pivot, um, be that within our own company, rightfully so. Like, having people bring up divergent viewpoints is really important. Early investors were saying, there's nothing here. Like, pivot to something else, do hardware or something. We had a lot of no's in our first 6 months as a company, raising our seed round. Tim Shaw from Context was our very first institutional investor, but we had a lot of no's. Most of it revolved around market size, market timing, lack of conviction over XYZ, whatever boilerplate rejection you get. And so there were a lot of times where I think if I didn't feel a calling to this problem, I would have listened to everyone else and pivoted to something else. But frankly, part of starting a company is having enough conviction to keep going when the market's not yet there. Sometimes it could be very early. Like, there's a company that we talked to that tried to do something similar 10 years prior to us. And when I talked to the CEO now, or the former CEO of that company, he's like, yeah, that's exactly our vision 10, 15 years before you. We were just too early. Timing, but you have to have the conviction to get you through when the market's not yet there. And fortunately, whether by luck or by design, or by sheer compelling pitches, we were able to get the market there. So here we are.
That's awesome. Well, hey, look, you obviously proved you had the conviction to get through your flight training, and we're not afraid to have daily setbacks in that regard. And it obviously transitioned over to what you're doing at Kestrel and have been able to grow there. And that's
Yeah.
fantastic. I mean,
Yeah.
and talk about, I guess I would love to hear as we kind of get ready to close things down a little bit, where are you now and what's next? I mean, how does it, because you can't stay stagnant. I mean, as you alluded to, I mean, the market is changing all the time and evolving all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
if we talk 2 years from now, I mean, where do you hope to be, 2 years from now?
Yeah. Yeah. A year ago, 2 years ago, we were early. And so it was convincing people that this was going to be a market, that orchestration was something that people were going to start talking about and building requirements around. Now we don't have to do that. We've got demand signal in every um, service branch in the intelligence community in every country that has an interest in surveillance. This is a demand signal, and even commercial enterprise. We have our first commercial enterprise customer now. So all of these, my job has shifted, and so now it's the Secretary of the Air Force announced this program called Ringleader 6 minutes into his keynote at AFA a few weeks ago, basically saying this is the year for sensor orchestration. So now every company who does work in defense tech or C2 programs is going to do sensor orchestration. This is what they do. Now everyone's pivoting into this space. So now it's about how do we execute? And that's where, going back to when we started this company, we have conviction over the business model. Can we deliver this with high margins because we're able to reuse the product? Did we put enough thought into the design of our product to be modular but flexible such that we can use it for the next several years? The jury's still out, but we haven't been proven wrong yet. And obviously, I have high internal conviction, but I'm not going to sit here and tell investors that there's no risk here, because there always is. But
That's great. I think that's a healthy. I mean, look, you bet on yourself, but you have to have that willingness to change and modify and update to the market, right? Things are going to change, and there's going to be more competitors in there, right? I mean, you were maybe right on time again, but your peer was too early, and you hit it pretty sweet on that ramp. But again, if you once the door is open, it makes it easier to access for other people to join in too, right? So you have to, how do you differentiate yourself? I guess is probably going to be the challenge moving forward and staying competitive. And what do you do that others can't? So that's exciting
yeah,
times ahead for sure. Well, as
yeah,
we as we kind of wrap things up, I mean, what do you want folks to know about getting into the founder space, the startup space, about Kestrel as a whole? I close it up with some good advice for our folks out there that want to get into this space themselves, and maybe help them on the right path.
yeah. I think what I'd say, particularly now, is don't jump into being a founder by accident. Like, take the time to do your homework, to have conviction over something, at least a vector. You're always going to need to be open to new ideas and open to pivots, and that's given as a founder. But it's actually a pretty hard environment right now to start a company that is going to be viable 3 years from now, because what a lot of the acquisition reform does and has done and will continue to do is lower the bar for entry for a lot of companies. What that does effectively, like said another way, is we're increasing the noise floor. Now it's even harder to stand out as a good company when there's a world of all of these companies that probably shouldn't exist, frankly. So it's actually, in a lot of ways, it can make things harder to succeed 2, 3, 4 years down the road. And so that just further, like, my advice to a lot of people who are considering making this jump is have strong conviction, because you're going to hit a lot of losses when you're seeing a bunch of other people get these wins, and you're going to have to get through that. And if you don't have the conviction to get through that, don't start a company. Come join Kestrel.
Well, I think that's great advice. And really, again, thank you so much for the time today. I'm fired up to see where this goes, and excited that you were able to kind of be the one that opened the door for this. And the sky's the limit, man. So look forward to seeing the future success for you. Thanks for having the program, and hope we'll see you soon. Thanks again, Thomas.
Thanks, Beau. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. For more content, follow us on Instagram at TheMilitaryVet or on LinkedIn. Join us at an upcoming event or learn more on our website, TheMilVet.org. Feel free to email us directly at leadership@themilvet.org. Thank you so much and take care.